Hello. This is Hannah Renan.
And I'm Christina Brown.
And you are listening to Two Moms on a Couch. And we are here with our next episode. Today, we're talking about self-care, which is, a hype phrase right now. Everyone's talking about self-care. And I think this actually, now that I think about it, I think self-care really ties into mental health, which is making a really big, you know, which is very much talked about today. Both on social media, among mom groups, and at work with employers and companies. There's a huge focus on mental health. And I think for women, that can be even more important because we tend to take on a lot, I think. And I can imagine for you, Christina, because, you have your own business, you're juggling so many things. So how do you make time? How do you personally make time for self-care? And what does self-care look like for you?
Yeah. So I think that, what you just said there, like with self-care kind of being more about mental health or really, really tied to that. I think that that's kind of how I think of it more too. I think if we look on social media and we watch YouTube videos that are like the self-care routine, like, or look at those thumbnails, it's always like, oh, well, having a matcha tea latte or whatever it is, or like going to get my nails done, or let me have a spa day. But, those things don't really help you to, take care of yourself, right? Like they're good for, hygiene and, things that we also want to look good, right? Like, so it's important from that standpoint. But when I think of self-care, I think of, truly like nurturing and making sure that yourself is good. It's refilling your cup is, kind of how I think about it. And I think, who is it? Lisa Nichols talks about it a lot. She says, you can't pour from an empty cup. And, it is definitely true, for women, because yes, we do take on a lot, but I think it can be true for anyone. Just if you're not being completely aware of the fact that you need to make sure that you're factoring time to replenish yourself and make sure that you're good, process your, emotions and all of that. So, for me, that's what self-care looks like. It's taking time, for myself to process my emotions and, check in and see if I, feel that I'm going in the right direction, in life, or if I'm, feeling frustrated by something. It's taking time to dig into that and understand, what is going on there. Like, why do I feel that way, and what can I do about it? Like, that's the most important question.
And I guess what I'm getting at is, how do you actually make time for that? Because, we talked about overwhelm in the last episode. And I think a lot of people struggle with that, especially after, the pandemic. It sort of highlighted, I think, for a lot of people, just how difficult it is to make that time. So how do you make that time in your day? I mean, you get up really early. You get up at like 3:30 in the morning, right?
Yeah.
You work, you have your son, you do homeschooling, you do whatever daily activities, and then, the day ends, and then you go to bed, and then you wake up and repeat the cycle. So where do you find time to do that?
Yeah, I mean, self-care isn't a daily practice, in my opinion. Like, it is, but not the full routine, right? So self-care on a daily basis for me can be like, the 30 minutes before I fall asleep. I'm just gonna let myself think about some stuff, or I'm gonna let myself completely just, escape and, use a space documentary or learn something, new, something nerdy that I'm interested in, and, practice some escapism. But when it's the real self-care and I need a process, that could be, it could be while I'm cooking dinner. It could be, while taking a shower, if that's TMI.
Hmm.
Or it could be like, really just taking a time out for
Hmm.
myself, whether that's, being completely alone in the home or, going elsewhere. I know we talked about overwhelm in the last episode, but, something I didn't share on that episode is I don't get overwhelmed.
Hmm.
And it's always weird, like, or people think that's like ridiculous, like, how's that possible? And all of that, like, whenever I say that, but overwhelm is just a feeling, and overwhelm is just us not making sure that we are prioritizing and, making sure that we're taking care of the things that actually matter. A lot of times, when we feel like things are, maybe a little bit too much or something like that, maybe we jumped into too many things too fast. Maybe we added too many things on without thinking about the repercussions and, different things like that. Or, maybe there are things that are outside of our control, but I believe in making thoughtful decisions, and thoughtful decisions could be to add something on, or it could be to remove something.
Mm-hmm.
So if, I find that something doesn't work for me, I'm pretty quick to adjust it, or, try to make a tweak in it to make it work for me better. Or if it just isn't serving me, and it's, and by not serving me, I mean it's draining my energy, then I'm, quick to be like, okay, this is not my thing. And I'm just very, very cognizant of not just how I feel, but also my energy. And I learned to do that because I've had some struggles in the past with, mental health and all of that stuff. I went through major depression for a few years. High functioning, depression. I was still
Yeah.
doing all the things, but it is that mask that we put on to be like, listen, I'm fine, I'm good, but on the inside, like, you're really falling to pieces. And it wasn't falling to pieces because, like, oh, I'm like, I can't handle the things. It was just falling to pieces because, like, my mind was telling me how much I suck every single day, right?
Yeah.
So and that's just, kind of like the nature of the beast. But I started, and I tried the whole antidepressants thing. I tried, the counseling thing, and I do like talk therapy. I think that's, wonderful, because people can help you to see, some of your blind spots, or just affirm that you're on the right track with your thought processes. So I
Mm-hmm.
love talk therapy, but I don't like medicines. And I
Yeah.
found that, with trying to do something like antidepressants, it was doing a lot more harm than good. I was having a lot of like migraines. I was gaining weight. I just felt like horrible. So I was like, no, this is not going to be my path forward. And I just needed to make some changes in my life, with how I ate the foods that I was putting into, my body. But most importantly, like, just taking a look at where I felt that I didn't have control, or wasn't allowing myself to exercise control in my own life. And over, the course of years, I was able to, for the most part, overcome depression. I don't know if that's ever like a thing that you like fully overcome. Like, it's always like kind of a part of you. Um, but it's just not a limiting factor in my life, or it's not trying to be a limiting factor in my life. I hope that makes sense.
Hmm.
But it was really by like cutting out the things that were not serving me, and doing more of the things that were, and not caring, but stop worrying about, like, well, what does that mean for other people? Because I feel like that's what we start to do a little bit too much, is we'll hold ourselves back, because we're afraid of what other people are going to think, or because we don't want to hurt other people, and different things like that. Especially as, as women, we kind of like carry our own emotions, but then the emotions of everybody else. And then a lot of times that, turns out to be projecting, like, we're, fearing this thing because that's maybe how we would feel in this circumstance, but that other person doesn't even feel that way. So that's why I'm big on communication. I'm big on just checking in with myself, making sure that my cup is full. Because I do agree, self-care is more about like, well, what is your actual mental status? What are you carrying that just isn't serving you? And how can you make a change so that you can actually live a happier and more fulfilling
Yeah.
life?
Well, and I
And
know I sort of took us on a little path because we had talked about, doing this episode on self-care and sort of what our respective strategies, but as we got on, I realized I was thinking through it and realized self-care, everyone talks about it, but in reality, it's a way of safeguarding your mental state, whatever that
mhm.
looks like. And I know you said that self-care isn't a daily thing. I think it depends on the person. For me, 100% self-care and mental
Well,
health is a daily
yeah. So
practice for me.
yeah, I revised that to say not the full routine.
Oh, got it.
I had said, like maybe little things here and there,
Yeah.
but the full routine, like taking a whole, hour for myself, like if we're
Right.
talking about how do I make time for self-care, I'm not trying to take an hour or more than that, like every
Yeah.
day for myself. But I
Yeah.
do agree, like little things, like just making sure you're checking in, like I said, like even if it's just the 30 minutes before I go to bed, like that to me is, more than enough. I guess because I'm tweaking or paying attention to the right things for
Yeah.
myself type of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Well, and I think um, there's different types of self-care.
Hmm.
There's the self-care you need to be able to like function as your best self on a regular basis. And then when I think about it, there's like the pampering, right? Like the extra,
Hmm.
sometimes like every now and then you need something extra. You need time away, you need, the spa or whatever whatever works for you. And not everything's going to work for someone else. Like I don't get my nails done, not because I don't enjoy it when I go, but to me, it seems like a complete waste of my time to spend like 2 hours at the salon to put on nail polish that will be gone in 2 weeks. Like it just
Hmm.
doesn't fill my cup at all. So,
Yeah.
but for somebody else, like that's a very pleasant experience and it makes them feel really good and it will help them sort of recharge. Like
Hmm.
for me, I love the water and the ocean. So like when I need to get away, and I was supposed to do a day recently, and my kids were very like they needed me, so I had to table that that time. But I will say like, hey, sweetheart, to my husband, can you watch the kids for half a day or a day? Like I'm going to the beach. Like I need to go for a walk, go for a run. I need time just to myself without like somebody asking me to help them do something.
Yeah.
um, but those are like, once a quarter, like once every few months, type of thing. That's not something that I would love to be by the water every day, but I think I had never really thought about like mental health or daily self-care until like the beginning of last year. I've always been a night owl. Like I used to sleep in, it's just mornings were not my thing. And then like January 1st of last year of 2022, something changed in December, and I decided I was going to start going to the gym in the morning, like early in the morning before the kids got up, before my husband got up, before anyone else. And so I started going to the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning. Um, and that became my self-care routine. And I feel it when I don't go to the gym in the morning. It changes sort of the way I approach my day. It just affects my ability to manage things. I mean, I still get it done. Obviously, we're moms. We power through. But for me, at least, like that became a really important part of my daily self care. And I think you're right. Like I think not everybody needs it all the time. And for some people, it's 15 minutes. For some people, it's an hour. Like whatever they need throughout the day to check in. But for me, like I needed that hour of time where it's just me. I'm not responsible for anybody else, or, you know, getting anyone anything, or, you know, anything like that. And I could spend time doing something that's just for me.
Yeah. No, I think that I think that one of the most important things is really just understanding, well, what does self-care like look like or feel like
For you.
for you. There are definitely different types of, you know, self-care. There are you know, the hygiene based ones, there are the grooming type of things, there are the you know, retreat or vacation type of things. You know, I've done those. I used to go, like once summer came about, I'd go, you know, out to the beach for 2 or 3 days, you know, by myself, just to, you know, have time away. It was also kind of a work retreat, so I would be able to like focus on some goals and things like that, and like re-baseline for the rest of the year and project out into the new year, but just be able to have that focus time to work on that.
Mhm.
But then also, you know, be by myself and, you know, talk to people, function in society as, you know, just a person, not all of the roles that, you know, I play on a day-to-day basis. You know, that's something that I think is really important, but I think it's really just figuring out, well, what does self-care look like to you? For me personally, um, uh, it is just about making sure my energy is good.
Okay.
That's literally like all I need. I like to I like to take care of myself as well, but for me, I just don't necessarily see that as self-care, just because yes, it doesn't really like refill my cup, and it
Mm.
is about those things that, like, you know, what refills your cup. Um, for me, it's like literally just checking into my emotions and like just giving myself a wee bit of downtime if I need it for the day, or not. But I think it's also like getting yourself to a place where you're usually running at pretty optimal levels. I
Hmm.
think that what happens is that we don't start looking at self-care until, you know, we're pretty drained.
Mm.
And then that means like we have to do like so much more, or like so like make it like so often or so frequent to try to revive that, you know, to try to, you know,
Mm.
refill that cup even to get it to like halfway full, right? Um, and that, I think, is where we run into some of the, like, you know, systemic issues where it's like, okay, I'm not taking care of myself. I don't know what I want. I'm not happy. And really, it's like, well, is it that you're not happy, or is it that you're just not making sure that you're doing all the things, but just making sure that you're good? You
Hmm.
know, like, and I don't know, like that. I probably am not explaining it well, but like
No,
that
I
to
think you're
me,
explaining it just fine.
yeah, like that
And
to me is self-care. Is like just make sure that you're good. Like
yeah.
I just want to make sure that like I'm not putting my crap onto other people. You know, like I want to make sure that if I, you know, feel some type of way like towards a person, it's because of the interaction with that person, not because I have, you know, stuff that I need to handle and take care of. You know, I want to make sure that I know that I am um like present, you know, when it comes to like
Hmm.
spending time with my kid, or, you know, a friend, or, you know, anyone else that I'm like in the moment with. And that to me, if I'm not being present, that means that there's some area of my life that I need to address, um because I can't show up as my best. So I don't know, that's how I look at it. Like, how can I be my best and
Right.
have the energy and the state of mind that is going to keep me showing up as my best and just be happy, you know?
Yeah. Well,
So,
and I think that that sort of begs a larger question, because, you know, we talk about self-care, and we talk about how it's really sort of like mental health care, like to check in on yourself. But as I'm thinking about it, and as we're talking about it, there's two parts to it, right? And we said there's, you know, there's lots of different types of self-care, but there's sort of what you do to recharge, and then there's what you do on a daily basis to be happy with yourself as a human being. And that's going to be different for different people, right?
Mm.
But I think one of the common things, especially with folks who feel like they're not happy with certain areas of their life, you know, I think it completely depends on sort of like taking stock of where you're unhappy.
Yep.
I know for me, for a long time, I had this habit, something I still struggle with, of not keeping promises that I make to myself. So like I would tell myself I'm going to get up early and go to the gym, and I wouldn't do it. I'd hit the snooze button, and then it'd be, you know, an hour later or whatever, it was too late. Or, you know, I would tell myself I'm going to start a podcast, and then I never do it. Or I'm going to write a book, and I'd start it and never finish it, type of thing. And I think that for me, at least, when I did that, eventually you erode your own confidence and trust in yourself, no matter how much you outwardly appear to be confident and, you know, doing whatever you're doing. And that takes a toll. And so, like, for me, at least, when I started doing the morning workout routines, I didn't even think about it as self-care. I thought, for once in my life, I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do for myself. Like if I say I'm going to get up in the morning, I'm going to get up in the morning and go to the gym. And it was about building the habit of knowing that if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that like, and I spent probably a year building that habit. I know there's like all these numbers, you know, they say 21 days to build a habit. There's, you know, there's other things. I think it completely depends on the person. And I think that a habit, you know, this word habit, I know we're completely veering off track here, but this word habit is, I don't know that I like the word, because it's not about habit, it's about lifestyle. It's what are you prioritizing in your life that becomes your lifestyle. And so I think what you're talking about, which is making sure that you're checking in on a regular basis on your mental health and how you're feeling and sort of what works and what doesn't work for you on a regular basis, has to become part of your lifestyle. So that, and when that happens, it's not a lot of work to do it, right? Like once you actually make it part of who you are at your very core, it's not a big deal, because you fit it in to your life, and that's just how you live your life.
Yeah, no, I definitely you know, agree with that. It's, you know, just it's more a way of being as opposed to, and yeah, that's, I think that's how you know, I think of it. Like I don't necessarily think about self-care in the traditional way that you know, people do. I don't think of like, oh well, I need to, you know, give myself some self-care. You know, I'm either good or I'm not good. And if I'm not good, then I need to make a change. And like that's just like how I kind of navigate like my life. Because I think that what you said though, like in terms of keeping promises to yourself, like I think that's really important, because a lot of people, I don't know, maybe it's a lot of people.
No, I think it is.
Depending on, yeah, like depending on I guess who you are, it can be really challenging to do something if there's no external accountability tied to it. So, and
Yes.
that, like, you know, gets into the people pleasing stuff, and that gets into the, you know, all sorts of you know, different things, right? So I definitely agree, like that erodes like self-confidence, self-esteem, and ultimately your self-worth if you're not doing the things that you want to do for yourself. You're essentially saying, well, you're not worth it, so that's why I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
But
Well,
the
and most of the
opposite
time
is
people give
true.
up, like after
Yeah.
years of not keeping promises, and so they just stop.
Yeah, because that underlying belief is, well,
I'm not going to do it
essentially like
anyways.
I'm not worth it.
Right.
You know, like, well, and it goes deeper than that. You know, it's like, well, I'm not worth it. I don't deserve it. You know, a lot of times is what we're like saying to ourselves. And we talked a little bit, I think, on an episode, or maybe that's the one that we didn't post, like that, about like locus of control, like
Oh
that's
yeah. Yeah,
something.
we didn't post that one, but maybe
Yeah.
we'll for all our listeners, we have an episode that we did that was very, very long and completely veered off track into a topic we had not planned to discuss. So
Yeah. But it's like it all, like, to me it always goes back to that locus of control. Like either you think you are like the one who's in charge of, your life, and therefore you're going to prioritize yourself and the other areas that matter to you, or you think you aren't, and those are the two like ends of the spectrum, and we are somewhere in between, and we can
mm,
change based on all the different things that are going on, like the
sure.
circumstances of our lives are at different points in time. But I feel like, if we're constantly not doing the things we say we're going to do, particularly for ourselves, then that also takes away that locus of control. It takes away that like zest for life, that belief that we can
Yeah.
actually make it what we want it to be. And ultimately, that's where we stop, feeling happy.
Mm-hmm.
Because happiness, in my opinion, comes from within. It's not an external thing, or it's not about having things on the outside. It's more about
Right.
where you're at, like on the inside.
Right.
So
Well,
I
and
do think,
I will say there are external factors that can impact happiness. Like you can do all the work in yourself, but if you're in a situation where you've got people around you that are constantly, bringing you down or like telling you, like sending you negative messages, that's going to change your ability to actually be happy.
I don't know if it changes the ability to, it just makes it harder to. And I think that's something that might be another topic. Because
Oh, it's
I
definitely
have,
another topic.
yeah, I have very direct experience with that, that I can certainly share. But it makes it a lot harder to. And it was shifting my mindset around that. Like instead of thinking about it like that and letting myself, even for a minute, see myself as a victim, but then again taking back that control, that really shifted, the ability there to, or
Right. Well, and
actually
different types of relationships, right? Because they say like you're
the
the sum
average
of the
of the
five
five
people
people
around
that you
you.
spend the most time with.
Yeah, and
Yes.
if you've got people around you that you spend time with that are not doing things that are going to
Oh
support
yeah.
anything you're trying to do, whether it's business, whether it's personal life, whether it's how you raise your kids, like if you surround yourself with those type of people, that's going to impact your happiness, whether you want to admit it or not. It's going to make everything harder.
Yeah.
And I
let's
think
let's
for me, almost impossible to actually be where you need to be or where you want to be. But we'll talk about that in
Yeah, we'll
another
talk about it,
episode.
because like I said, I've had a lot of struggle with that. So I would, yeah, be happy to share like kind of how I got myself out of thinking that way.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I think, yeah, when it comes to self-care, like, for folks who are like listening, I think figure out like what self-care means to you. And at the end of the day, like it's really about like what is gonna put your cup, you know, full. Like what is
Yeah.
gonna keep your cup as full as possible. And, figure out like what your threshold is too. Like some of us can, be good at 80%. Some of us need to be at 100% all the time, like in terms of that full cup. Some of us can be like, okay, up until about 50%. But like when we start to feel like, that battery life or cup, whatever helps you to visualize it,
Yeah.
when we start to feel like we're getting to that threshold, like we know like it's, no joke, you know, it doesn't
Right.
matter like, who needs what, I need to take a minute. And it's like it's all just like prioritizing, yourself.
Yeah. And I
And
think self-awareness is key,
yeah, yeah,
really, really key.
definitely.
Because I think without self-awareness, you end up in situations where you don't realize and then all of a sudden you start snapping and like
Mm-hmm.
because you're depleted and you're not your mental health has suffered now, but you weren't aware, so you didn't
Yeah.
realize that, hey, like I need a minute, I need to check in here, I need to something needs to change, I need to break, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yep. And that self-awareness like starts by, I mean, truly knowing yourself,
Yes.
like
Hardest
understanding
thing,
like,
by the way, and
mm-hmm,
scariest thing, I think, for most people. Also, a whole different discussion if we want to talk about it at some point. But yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
self-awareness, I think, is probably the most difficult thing for
Yeah.
most people.
The most like important. And like, I mean, then that we'll touch on like the other conversation that we're going to have too about like, other people and the influences
Oh,
around you,
yeah.
because people don't like it when you are confident sometimes,
Yeah.
especially if you're used to um bending, like doing the people
Yeah.
pleasing, and then you stop doing that. Like, oh, there's so much fun we can talk about with both of those topics. Let's get into it. We will.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that self-awareness piece, like, yeah, I completely agree. It's crucial.
Yeah. So I think bottom line out of all this is, look, self-care is going to be different for everyone. It's
Yeah.
gonna, there's different types. But the key is, for women, at least, this is for anybody, not just women, but as a woman, I speak from my experience. I can't say what it would be for a man, but or for anyone else for that matter. But it's being aware of who you are, what you need, like what you're capable of sort of handling before you get to a breaking point. And figuring out, like, for some people, they need therapy more than they need anything else.
Mm-hmm.
For other people, therapy is it's a tune-up, but it's not something that's necessary or that they need on a regular basis. For some people, it's a daily practice. Some people, it's a weekly practice, monthly, whatever it is. So it's all about knowing yourself.
Yeah. And the only thing I would add to that is like, with therapy, I don't necessarily see that as like a regular self-care practice like across the board. However, if you are like suffering with actual mental health challenges, it's not just like, okay, I feel drained, I'm tired, I need to make a change. Like if it's actual mental health challenges, I strongly encourage reaching out to a mental health professional, because even if you think you don't need it, even if you are somebody who's incredibly self-aware and you can reason through things, it does help to just have somebody in your corner, like as you work on making changes. So
Yeah.
if it's mental health related and you're having some mental health challenges, get help with that. um
Yeah.
but if we're just talking about regular like self-care, to make sure that we don't get to that point, like, and just making sure that our minds is fresh, then I definitely don't think that therapy is necessary for that, but some people do.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I just think and then also there can be like this guilt stuff when it comes to like doing things for yourself. Like if you ever feel guilty for doing something for yourself, whether you're a mom or a spouse or a brother or a sister or a daughter, knock it off. Like seriously, like
Agree with that 100%.
yeah, like there is no guilt in it. I think that that's just we can put all this meaning and like put all this extra like negative emotion on things that don't need to be there.
Yeah.
The fact is, like, you have to take care of yourself in order to continue functioning and to continue living your life and to show up for the people you care about. So if that's what you need to do, or remind yourself, like, to be motivated because you're a bleeding heart and you're compassionate and you want to do all the things for all the people, remind
Mhm.
yourself that you cannot serve those people, you cannot be there for those people if you don't take care of yourself first. So
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that 100%.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. I think this is a slightly shorter episode, but in our next episode, we will be talking about screen time versus no screen time, which will be a very interesting discussion. We look forward to having you all join us on that one. But for now, have a great day. Bye.